This has got to be done in less than 20 minutes. This is fine.
Sometimes I'm mystery, sometimes I'm free, depending on my mood or my attitude. Sometimes I wanna roll or stay at home, walking contradiction.
Hi guys, welcome back to my space. If you're new here, my name is Jules and I'm the dancing advocate. So a recap on my previous episode. I spoke about dealing with trauma and how I have learned over the years to write things down so that I can let go of the emotions, the feelings, and the things that make me feel like, like the things that take me into a space that I'm not really comfortable in. And so, I also did mention the types of traumas, like the small t, big T traumas, and the effects those traumatic experiences have on different people. And I did mention that everybody reacts differently to different kinds of trauma. There's people who react to a big T trauma in a small T trauma way, and there are people who react to a small T trauma in a big T trauma way. Anyway, that's besides the point. So I did mention, I'm saying mention a lot, but yes, I did mention that in this episode that I will be talking about my first traumatic experience, or what I think was my first traumatic experience. I do regard it as small T trauma. And so let's get right into it. So for me, I feel like my first traumatic experience, yes, it was an emotional one. And it was what I think, or I term as rejection. Yeah. Let me paint the scenario. Yeah. Sorry. To drink some water. You need to hydrate. Have you gotten your bottle yet? Anyway, so for me, it was an emotional one. And yes, it was, let's say 16 years ago. Don't count. Don't count. But it was about 16 years ago or more. But and it was a romantic sort of rejection. Now, there's a guy I really, really liked. And after we had the talk and we were like, yes, so this is what we're doing, we've decided that we're going to date, he ended up picking another girl over me. And at the time, of course, it was so painful. It was hella painful, and I remember just trying to play back and sit and think, okay, so did I go wrong somewhere? Is it that I'm maybe too young for him? And I wasn't. I think our age difference was like 3 years or 2 years. But I think at that time, it did make a big difference. And the other girl was, I think, his age. And so for him, he felt like maybe they will understand each other better than him and I. And so I like racked my brain for a while just thinking, okay, is it maybe our cultural differences? Is it the schools we go to? Is it, for a while I was just, like, there has to be a reason why he picked her over me. And especially after we had sat down and talked about it and decided that we were going to date. Yes, I was young, and of course I feel like at a young age, most times everyone you meet is a possible husband. Like, this is it, my one true love. So one person I'm going to date until we get married, have children, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, because you're still probably in that fairy tale phase, and it's simple, yeah, and you assume that that's the beginning and the continuation and the ending, and it don't get better than that, you know. So for me, I remember my initial reaction, of course, was just sort of trying to find out from him and just asking all those questions like why did it happen the way it did, why did you pick her over me, and I didn't even think she was in the running of being your girlfriend, or you know. And then later I just, you know, stopped asking, and the worst part was we were in similar circles, so we would see each other often. And now it was worse because then I would see them together and we had mutual friends. So it just wasn't sort of like really, now it's just in my face. And so that began my, or what I call normalizing rejection, right? So from then on, I really never dealt with it from there. And I think most times when we don't act on traumatic experiences, or we don't deal with the emotions that come with traumatic experiences, you grow with them, you grow in them, they grow in you, and then you just become one, and eventually they are a part of you, they are who you are. So you don't see the toxic trait in having or holding on to the emotions that come with traumatic experiences, yeah? So for me, my initial reaction, as I mentioned, was the pain, the hurt, and then I eventually let it go, but then I didn't deal with it. So it sounds strange because yes, there's the side of me letting it go and the side of me not dealing with it, because then that would mean that if I let it go, it would mean that I dealt with it. But most times we find ourselves letting go of things but not actually dealing with them. And I found that to be a reaction in a lot of things that I do, even to date, and especially with regard to romantic relationships or situations that I find myself in, yeah? So experiences that I will go through, I will not sit down and think, okay, so how is this making me feel? If so-and-so says that they can't be with me right now, if so-and-so says that so-and-so is better for him than I am, how does that make me feel? So what am I going to do about it? It's more of, okay, so he says that he can't be with me or we can't be together because maybe he's going through this and this, or we're just not compatible. And then instead of sitting down and being like, okay, let's follow it up, let's discuss, let's talk about it, and then I now take myself out of that situation, sit down and think about how everything has made me feel, and then deal with it, I let it go. And in a sense, that's just like running away from traumatic experiences or running away from our problems, because and I think for me it's sort of like a defense mechanism where you don't want to dwell in that pain, you don't want to dwell in those emotions, so you walk away from them and you let them go, not realizing that you're not actually dealing with them, and then later they pile up, yeah? So of course I did not deal with that first sense or sort of rejection, yeah? And then when it happened again, I can say for me it's happened a couple of times, and not necessarily to that deep point where you're sitting with someone and you're like, okay, so we're doing this, and then they walk away. It could be just as simple as you see yourself with somebody and you're sitting and you're thinking, okay, maybe this is it, and then a few months down the line, things aren't going as in your head or things change and suddenly thing that seemed like it was headed in the direction of a relationship or of something great or something final is now headed in the complete opposite direction, and you're just like, okay, so I'm not going to deal with it, and I'm going to walk away from it. And because it does hurt, yeah, no matter how big or small the situation or traumatic experience is, it still will hurt, and it will still have an effect on you, either emotionally, physically, mentally. It will always have an effect on you. And the best thing you can do for yourself and for those around you is dealing with the traumatic experiences as they come. It's easier said than done, of course, but that is always the best way you can deal with traumatic experiences, yeah? So for me now, from the traumatic experience itself, and then to the initial reaction, and then now my reaction over the years, was now the first thing, normalizing rejection. So I would never deal with it. Okay, someone says no to me, even if it came now, let's say, to a job kind of setting, it came to friendship kind of setting, it came to anything that would amount to some sort of rejection. I never dealt with it. For me, it was normal. Like, okay, so and so has said no. I won't bother to find out why. I won't bother to like sit down and deal with what I'm feeling at the time. Hey, yo, these things happen, so we move on from it. Sometimes it is good moving on from stuff, because then you don't have to constantly dwell on them and constantly just feel pain over them. But most times, like, I would not, knowing what I know now and how I deal with things now, I would not advise anybody to constantly let go of things. Like, if you feel like it's something you really need to talk about, it's something that you really need to deal with at the time, let somebody think you're crazy, let somebody think you're overly emotional, let somebody think you're all those things. But at least by the time you've asked the questions, dealt with the situation and the experience, by the time you're out of it, you won't go back. Yeah? Because okay, so and so made a certain decision just because of this and this and this, and these are his reasons, or these are her reasons. And so I am at peace with it. And yes, it hurt me. Yes, I felt pain, but eventually I will, deal with the emotions as they come. And then so that when you're finally out of it, you're like, okay, you know what? I felt this way about this thing. It hurt me. It made me go crazy for a bit, but I am now okay. And when you actually say it out loud that you're okay, or when you tell somebody, yeah, so and so broke my heart, or so and so, or I didn't get the job that I wanted, or I didn't find my dad, or when I found my dad or mom, they wanted nothing to do with me, then you're eventually okay with it, because you actually dealt with the emotions and with the traumatic experiences as they came. Okay, so yeah. So the first effect over the years was the normalization, and then of course now using it as an excuse. This is, I think, one of the biggest things that we do to ourselves. As we grow older, you use the fact that you went through a traumatic experience when you were younger as an excuse for bad behavior, or as an excuse to just be mediocre, or for an excuse to get away with stuff, just because God forbid your parents separated at a young age, so now you only know how to respect women, or you only know how to respect men, or you only believe in I don't know, like the effects that it would have on you. And then now it manifests in excuses. So you're like, yeah, I'm going to be an alcoholic because my dad was an alcoholic, or because my mom was an alcoholic, or I'm going to be a player just because I come from a polygamous family and it was okay. And so, I mean, I'm going to be okay with that. So you sleep around and you do all these other things just because, you know? And I feel like now for me, in the sense of the rejection, it wasn't necessarily an excuse for bad behavior, but it was just an excuse to not deal with the emotions as they came or with the traumatic experiences as they came. It was more like, yeah, because I went through this and this, I can act this way. And because I didn't deal with it at the time, and yes, it was painful at that time, but maybe it's not the same thing, or maybe it is the same thing. And so I ran away from making huge decisions or making big decisions because of a traumatic experience. So in for me, in the way that the making excuses came to manifest was, or is, because it's still something that I'm really trying to figure out, is now running from hard conversations and situations where I feel like if it ends up in rejection, it's going to really hurt. So I run. And my excuse is, hey, yo, you know what? I went through a traumatic experience and some of these things feel a little bit similar. So why not get over it while I'm ahead, quit while I'm ahead, because then I won't have to go through the same pain. I won't have to go through the same traumatic experience or something similar. And the funny thing is, as much as sometimes we think some of these experiences are exactly the same because, yeah, so and so rejected you, it probably is your fault, or it's their fault, or it's something you did, it's something they did, um, you end up finding out that because you did not deal with it or because you ran away from it, you really don't know how it would have ended up. You don't know how exactly it would have been. But just because you think, hey, yo, this is the same exact thing, this is the same thing that happened to me 10 years ago, it's going to pan out the same, not necessarily. And that's the mistake we make as human beings because of comparison. So we compare situations, we compare things, and you're like, if so and so did this, and this person is probably going to do the exact same thing, so I might as well walk away before it gets to that point. Yeah. So that's one thing that I'm really trying to work on, and it's helped in the sense that now when I sit down and write and say, okay, so this is why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, it's because of what happened to me some time back. So is it the exact same situation? No. So what can I do differently? Or is it the exact same situation? Yes. So should I run? Stuff like that. But it's really difficult, and I mean, even as I speak to you right now, it's, for me, it's a journey. It's something that you perfect every other day. It's something that you go through every other day. It's something that you work on every other day, and it's, of course, easier said than done. But yeah. So eventually, I feel like the trauma became a part of me, making those excuses and living in those holes that I had dug, to the point that not trusting or believing that because something is good, then I probably don't deserve it. And it's a sort of, hey, it's too good to be true. It's going to be a mess soon. Like I had reached that point of, yeah, if it's too good right now, like I'm just waiting for that shoe to drop. Like there's no way it's going to be good all the way, which is really bad because then you you even walk away from things that are good for you, or you walk away from experiences that can be amazing. You can walk away from a job, or you can walk away from even applying for a certain job because you're thinking, it's probably just going to be the exact same thing. And it's not necessarily the truth. Things are different, people are different, situations are different. They may have similarities, but in the end of it, at the end of it all, they never pan out the same. And not unless, yes, there's that whole thing of God trying to teach you a lesson. So the same thing keeps happening to you. I think I've reached that point where I'm like, God, I am tired of the, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be learning. So you just tell me. Show me, write it down. Here, this is what you're supposed to learn from this experience, and that's why it keeps happening. So now that you have learned it, let's move on. Like, I wish it was that easy. I know you can hear me. I actually wish it was that easy, because then now we would have been in a completely different situation. I probably wouldn't be telling this story right now. But anyway, one more effect that it had on me long term was an issue of pride. Not dealing with it most times made me feel like I wasn't the one in the wrong. It would manifest differently in other people, because then the people who would constantly feel like, okay, I'm not enough, or I'm being rejected because of something that is wrong with me. So for me, it manifested differently, because I was like, yeah, you're rejecting me. It's not. I'm not. Like, I ain't the problem. Even when I didn't bother to find out why someone walked away or why someone made the decision that they did, I just concluded most times, actually, I think it's all times, that I was not the problem. It could not have been me. And that's like an issue of pride, because then I would, I'm the good guy here. I can't be the bad guy. It can't be that I am weird in a certain way that this person would never understand, and they are, fine without me. But then it was always so and so left. It must be they are the ones on the wrong. So that was more of a long-term effect. So yeah, those are the, let's say, 4 things. So the normalization of the rejection, using it as an excuse for stupid behavior, not necessarily bad, but stupid behavior. 3, the trauma being a part of me, because now I was not dealing with it. 4, the pride issue. Eventually, I came to realize that I had to let them go, and not let them go in the sense of running away, but let them go in the sense of dealing with them. Now I sit down and unpack, and I'm like, okay, even if somebody will think I'm crazy, even if somebody will think I'm emotional, I would rather sit down with them, talk to them, and understand where they're coming from, understand why they're making a certain decision, and then now I unpack. Okay, so why am I feeling like this? Is it because so and so did this, and is it because it's something similar to what has happened to me in the past? And then now, like, okay, so what do I want to do about it? Is it something I want to work at? Is it something that I want to try and see if it's going to work out? Or is it something that I need to let go of? So it's really helped me now. Now how dealing with trauma, where I write down, and now so I've been writing it down. I'm like, okay, so and so did this, or this and this happened to me, or I didn't get this job. Why did I not get this job? Or I lost this contract. Why did I lose this contract? How is it making me feel? Is it something that happened in my past, or such like things? So it's easier said than done, and because as human beings we have gotten used to letting things pile up before we deal with them. It's very, very, it's such a silly human-like behavior, but most people, even those who are emotionally aware or self-aware, most people deal with traumatic situations by, much later in life, or, letting them pile up. And then when it gets, like, when shit hits the fan, that's when you're like, oh yeah, I really need to deal with this. So my advice to you and your take home should be, 1, we need to learn as human beings to deal with traumatic experiences as they come. Yeah, for me, it was yes, okay. So I was rejected romantically at a young age, and for me, it's just like, please, you reject me? How dare you? And that was my attitude for a very long time, to the point that I did not deal with it. And even when I needed to deal with it, I would just, brush it off. And then it came to bite me in the ass, like badly, to the point that now I'm like, am I really made for this relationship thing? Like, is it made for me? Or, yeah, so now I've learned to, I need to sit down and actually deal with these situations as they come. Is it the same thing? Is it not? Do I need to work on it? Is it something of my fault? Like, am I the one at fault? Do I need to work on it? Do I need to deal with it? Is it someone I can sit down and talk to, or help understand each other? Is that possible? If not, then how am I going to handle it? How am I going to deal with it? Try this. Get a heap of mchanga somewhere, or stand somewhere, and use a water hose and pour water from one spot constantly where there was no way. Yeah, just pour water, pour water, pour water, continue pouring water at that same spot. As you look down, you realize that the water makes a way for itself. Then the way gets deeper into the sand, deeper, 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 and eventually it crumbles. Yeah. So you can imagine now, the water is those traumatic experiences. Yeah. The sand is who you are. Let's say if it's your heart, if it's your mind, if that traumatic experience affects you emotionally or psychologically. So the sand is that part of your body that gets affected by the traumatic experience, and the water is the traumatic experience. So if you keep pouring water in that same spot, it's happening over and over again, you eventually crumble, right? But then if you, let's say, stop or close the water, yeah, in this sense, close the tap, and at this point, let's say now you're dealing with as you close the tap, this means you are dealing with the traumatic experiences as they come. So pour a little water, deal with the traumatic experience. The sand will dry up, yeah? The sand dries up, and the way that the water had made is now covered up. If anything, it's covered up, yeah? Just what I'm trying to say. I know it's a long story, but just think about it in depth. But yeah, so if you keep dealing with each traumatic experience as they come, you won't have to deal with a boatload of it when now it reaches a point where you actually can't even deal with it because you're too in it, you're in too deep, you're in so much pain, you've gone through so much, you've done a lot of bad things to people just because, yes, I went through a traumatic experience when I was younger, and so I'm not going to deal with it, and I don't give a fuck about y'all, and all that, and eventually you break. So what I'm trying to say is, we need to learn as human beings to deal with traumatic experiences as they come. It's harder now, especially at the age, as you grow older, to now start sitting down and thinking, okay, so where does it stem from? Why am I the way I am? Why do I do certain things the way I do them? Is it because of what I went through? And is it something that I can fix right now? Sometimes it's not stuff you can fix. And I mean, it's okay, but then you can still deal with them without having to fix them completely. I mean, if right now I'm sit and start going back to each and every guy that broke my heart, yeah, that's a bit too much. That's a whole other hole that I'm trying to dig. Hey, yo, you remember that day when we were 17 and you did this? Or remember, back when we were 21? Do you remember? It doesn't that doesn't make sense. But what I am just trying to say is the best thing you can do for yourself right now is sit down and be like, okay, so this and this hurt me when I was 10. What can I do about it right now? Can I can I slowly just box all these things that happened to me and be like, okay, so this is why I act a certain way. This is why I do this and this, and this is why I do this and this. And so, um, is it something that I can fix right now, moving forward? Yeah, because the reason why I advocate for people to like go back in time and try and figure out why they act in a certain way or why they do certain things is for future purposes. Yeah, it's not necessarily to deal with or to go back and fix what happened. It's to be better for future you or for people who are around you at the time and people you're going to meet in future. Yeah, so if it's to be better for your children, if it's to be better for your spouse, if it's to be better, for all those things. But most importantly, it's also to now just be better for yourself, yeah? So that you're not holding toxic traits just because you went through what you went through, yeah? I mean, that's the excuse of bad behavior that I'm talking about. I mean, my task to you today, or what I would advocate for, or what I would want you to do is, sit down today and think, okay, why do I have feelings of fear or feelings of anxiety when certain things are happening to me? Is it because of a traumatic experience I went through? So how does that make me feel right now? Is it something that I can go back to and fix? If not, then what am I going to do about it right now? So yeah. And you know what? Not everything is the same. Not every situation is the same. Not every experience is the same. It could be different, but now just because of the traumatic experience you went through, you put all of them in one box and you're like, all this are the same, and so I'll deal with all of them the same. But anyway, yeah, so be better for you, be better for your future children or your children right now, be better for your partner or your family. Just be better, yeah, and do better. Yeah, so that's that. So I hope you've learned something. I'm not gone at in depth on the traumatic experience, but it was just an idea, and simple as it sounded, it ended up eating up on my different relationships and situationships that I've been through and that I've gone through. And one last thing, something that I think would be the major take home from this is we need to learn to forgive without closure. It's one of the hardest things to do. It's sometimes not humanly possible because we always want to know why we're forgiving somebody else, or you want someone to know that they hurt you, or you want to know the reason someone made a decision, and yeah, such like things. But sometimes it's not possible. Maybe, God forbid, the person died and you have never forgiven them for something they did to you, or it's not something people remember. It's something that happened way back and nobody remembers even that it actually happened, but you've held on to it, and you've held on to it with so much pain, and it's affected you in your life. It's made you the person you are today, and it's made you maybe a person you don't even like anymore. So the best thing you can do for yourself in such a situation is sit down and figure out why you're feeling the way you're feeling, unpack those emotions, and then eventually deal with them and let go, even if you cannot get the closure that you wanted. Yeah, and just forgive this person. Yeah, so it's easier said than done, but it's something that you can get to do better with practice, right? So thank you so much for watching. If you haven't watched the other videos, please go ahead and do that. And don't forget to live, love, and dance.